for first grade two-dimensional figures. I'm Rebecca Orr, the Math DRT.
And I'm Bailey Murphy, Math DRT.
So today we have a couple tasks for you to complete. Once you start doing the task, pause the video and think about, with this task, are there more than one answers to this task? And then for the second task, it may take a little bit longer, but think about, after you completed it, what skills do you think your students would need to be successful in accomplishing this task? We'll see you when you finish. Welcome back. Now we're going to look at the progression with the best standards. So take a look at the kindergarten standards and see what students were expected to do with 2D figures last year. Now here's what all first grade students are going to need to be able to do. So what's the difference in this first one, Bailey?
So I'm noticing that in kindergarten they were just identifying, comparing, and combining, but now they're going to be expected to sort the 2D figures.
Right, they're going to need to sort. They're also going to be sketching, whereas previously they did not sketch. And they're going to now also be decomposing versus just composing 2D figures. Here are some other things that first graders will be doing. Please take note of the different shapes that students are now going to be doing, which are...
So they have all the ones from kindergarten plus semicircles, trapezoids, and hexagons.
That's right. And then moving forward in second grade, they're going to need to do similar things, but then they're also going to start categorizing and identifying lines of symmetry. Let's look at the task that you completed. What skills would students need to be successful with this task? I would imagine a lot of different skills, right? What are some things that you think they would need to be successful?
Well, they have to look around the classroom and find these 2D shapes, so they're really going to have to connect what they're doing in the math classroom with the real world for sure.
Totally. They definitely need to make connections. What other things do they need just looking at the attribute list?
Well, they're going to need to know the attributes. They're going to need to know vertices, sides, and also the length of the sides.
Right, and they may have had some exposure to that in kindergarten, but we want to solidify that understanding and those vocabulary words in first grade as well. Some other things that we mentioned already is they're also going to now need to be able to sketch, not only just identify, but now they're sketching it by hand.
All right, so as we go through this unit, students are going to need to see and feel the physical models to help them better understand and describe attributes. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can use the shape, you can use popsicle stick, egg legs, and even geoboards. So in terms of thinking about sorting shapes, students are really going to have to understand and be able to properly use the attributes to identify, sort, and compare shapes. I want you to take a minute and look at these two groups of attributes, and what do you notice about them?
I noticed that some of them are definitely defining attributes, like it always is true for certain shapes, and some of them, like color, is not really a defining attribute.
Right, exactly. So one side is defining and one is non-defining, and the defining shapes can be used to identify the shapes. These attributes should be used to identify, compare, sort, and sketch shapes. So students should be able to determine the number of vertices, the sides, and if the figure is open or closed. We know that students are typically expected to use precise vocabulary, and so we might want to use the word corner and vertices interchangeably to help students understand what the difference is between a vertice and a side.
Yeah, I know last year in kindergarten we used corner mostly, so this year I'm going to make sure to use vertice.
Right. So take a minute, look at this. What attributes were these shapes sorted by?
Well, I know that the left look like all triangles and the right look like quadrilaterals. Although they might not understand quadrilateral in first grade, they should be able to say they all have 4 sides and the other ones all have 3 sides.
Absolutely. This information, these attributes, are going to be continued in both the math classroom, but also the real world objects. So you can see a list of the possible real world objects and how you can connect your 2D shapes to that. So after students can sort and describe the attributes or the 2D figures using the attributes, they are then going to be identifying and sketching pictures of 2D figures when they're given specific attributes. So for example, I have 6 sides and I have 6 vertices. What do I look like? What is my figure name? It would be a hexagon. And it's important to recognize that it can look different. They don't all have to be traditional hexagons. As long as they have 6 sides and 6 vertices, it matches the figure.
Totally. And maybe before I start sketching, could I have them like find something that has 6 sides, or maybe build it on a geoboard or with angle legs or like a little fuzzy stem?
Absolutely. They can identify it first, and they can even use those objects to sketch their picture. So I'm going to show you another example. This is, I have 4 sides and 4 vertices. And you're going to see in a moment that a bunch of examples are there, because there are several shapes that students will have that will match those given attributes, and that's totally fine as long as they can defend their answer.
Right, and trapezoid's going to be a big new one for this year.
It is. Just like with all the other things, students should use manipulatives and drawings to compose and decompose 2D figures. So when we're thinking about composing, that's when we're going to be using the shapes and we're going to make a new shape. So we have 2 trapezoids, and we're going to put them together to make a figure with 6 sides or a hexagon. Students can then use those actual pattern blocks and can trace it on their paper so they have it in a representation. Students will be expected to decompose shapes. So this takes us back to the task that you were asked to do earlier, and it says which figures could you use to make up the figures below. This is more of a challenging concept to do with tools, so you might want to consider having paper cutouts or even letting them fold things so that they can see, well, how can I do it? So you can split it into 2 triangles. You could also split it into 2 squares. There are multiple ways to decompose 2D figures, and as long as students can justify their reasoning, we're good to go. Thinking about the concrete representation and abstract thinking, we have the models, the angle legs, the geoboards. You move into the representation, and you can notice those drawings are not perfect, and that's okay. As long as they have the attributes that we want them to focus on, we're good. And then as students move through this, they'll get to that abstract island and they'll start thinking about, well, I know this is a trapezoid because it has 4 sides, 4 vertices, and it has 2 sides that are the same length. Remember that these 3 islands are not linear. You should be going back and forth throughout the entire time through this unit to really make sure students are solidifying their understanding of 2D figures.
Love that. Like my kids may be really good at making a triangle, but I may need to do a trapezoid or a hexagon with some concrete tools a lot more than I would a triangle or a square.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that's all we have for you today. We'll see you on the next Dive in 5. Bye.